two things happened. I almost decided one day to act out in the loft that I had all to myself, and all the execs were downstairs or on set. And I could go into this separate room and I could handle my business if I wanted to. Now, I never did. I was clicking around with the producers and writers in an office right behind me, where if they looked through the window, they could see what I was doing. That's powerlessness. Like the addiction didn't give a fuck that I could lose everything. For some reason, I didn't touch myself until my late teens, even though I was acting out. I know it's weird.
It's fascinating.
You know what it reminds me of is it Gollum, right? Lord of the Rings, like my precious, like you're just trying to keep that little stash all to yourself, and you'll do anything to defend it and lie about it or deny it or whatever. That is a fucking excellent question. I mean, you're kind of almost asking just nature nurture. I've told this, well, to friends. Oh my God.
Well, we're all friends.
Yeah, we're all friends. It's like it's terrible. It's like you're trained unhealthily by the porn, which is why all these sites and all the info you read, it's like, be sure to tell them it's not sex ed. It's you can call it entertainment, you can call it whatever you want, but it's not sex ed. It's not the real thing to this day.
My Instagram, in my opinion, is soft porn.
I want to, before we start chatting about the subject, just within ourselves, just take a few deep breaths and set the intention of whatever info we share and what will come out will best serve whoever eventually will be watching this. So it can go in like any which way direction. Let's just take a few deep breaths just to center ourselves. So as we have fun talking about this conversation that many do find sensitive and troubling, we can shed some light on some information for people to self-reflect, and we can trust that it will go in the direction of where it can best serve ourselves and then also the people that are coming in contact with this content. Wonderful.
Oh, good. Thank you very much. So I do have two dads, but one raised me and took care of me, and that's my namesake father. So
are your siblings your full siblings, or?
All my siblings are half. I have two sisters from my biological father, and they were just out from my daughter's graduation recently. And I have the two siblings from my adoptive father.
Interesting. Oh, adopted dynamics are so fascinating. I haven't read a lot yet into that, but how old were you then when you got adopted?
So my mother and he met right when I turned 9, and then they married, and I was adopted when I was 12. And I had already distanced myself from my biological father because he wasn't around. He left. My mom raised me, was a single mom until she met my adoptive dad, my namesake father. So so I'd already distanced myself. And when I went to court, I always like to tell everybody, like, how did that actually go down? And I was like, well, I stood in front of the judge and literally had to say, I want this person to be my dad, and that person is not going to be my dad. And it's kind of tough. It's a little bit of pressure to put on 12-year-old shoulders, but had to be done the way it was done. So yeah.
Right. In that moment, was your biological father, was there pressure? Was there resistance? Was there like, don't betray me type of thing?
There was a little, and that would be, I would only find out, what was going on, his inner machinations later on, because we do have an amicable relationship now. He knows my two teens. I have a girl and a boy, almost 18 and 16. And they have a good relationship with him. They also have a relationship with my mother and my adoptive father, who again just passed. But he was ill prepared. He didn't know it was court. He didn't know it was like legal eagle time. And I don't think he came with an attorney. And I think he's very charismatic. I like to think that some of my social aptitude comes from him, even though I wasn't raised from him. We talk about, what's it called? Epigenealogy or whatever it is. Yeah. But epigenetics. But anyway, he didn't come prepared. And my dad and mom's team were ready with attorneys and laying out the facts, and no child support and very few visitations over 12 years at that point didn't work in his favor.
Right. Yeah, that's also it's funny because with these conversations, people always can go a million different directions, because now like the whole thing of like child support is where I want to run off to.
And then your siblings, were you close with your siblings growing up?
Yeah, because I was 11 and 12 when they were born, so I helped babysit and hang out, and we had fun when they were little and did our own little games. I'm sure I took a lot of that into my parenting, actually, just acting the fool with them. And then we had a really bonding, the sort of doorway between their childhood childhood and kind of adulthood was when they were, like pre-teens. And I was in my mid-20s down in Los Angeles. I was a development exec down there in the Hollywood thing. And they came down to spend, it was the first time ever, they would just spend the two of them with me for, 3-4 days. We did all the tourist stuff. But like I said before the interview, I cuss like a sailor. Our whole family does. And yeah, all of our aunts and uncles, they would argue politics around the dinner table or breakfast table and just throw it. And what was great about the family is they would cuss and they would disagree, and it was conservative or liberal, whatever. And then they would just be like, all right, we're still family, and they go to work or do whatever they had with the rest of the day. So we all cuss. And my brother and sister went back home to Stockton from Los Angeles. And my mom called in a few hours later, and I thought she was checking in, like, oh, good, they landed safely, everything's fine. She was like, what the hell did you do to my kids? I was like, what? She's like, they're cussing every other fucking word. She's like, what is wrong with you? And I said, oh my God, that's bad. Yeah, there was high drama. We lost our keys at Magic Mountain, right? We had to, and like my keys to the car. So we were stuck in the valley trying to go back to Hollywood. So we had to find the keys, looking through the fence. It was a miracle. And some security guard gave them to us. I had a major asthma attack and didn't have my inhaler with me. So my brother slept through, 5-6 foot tall, paramedics waking me up in the middle of the night, or not waking me up, but giving me all the oxygen and everything. Yeah, there are stories. So yeah, we're close. Yeah.
Yeah, and safe to say that they probably had a blast, because there was something exciting when they're hanging out with you, and then going back home was a bit more.
Right. A little more square, back to the regular. And they just were describing the whole things, the whole visit with a lot of blue language, like I said. So
right. I didn't ask you, so what is your definition of sex, porn, and love addiction? And I understand that there might be maybe three answers to that, but go for it.
You know what? My umbrella answer for the processing or behavioral addictions that I focus on and that clients come to me for as a coach, let's divide it just into sex and love for a second. It's really simple, actually. It comes from a distillation of the 12 steps, because I got sober from my sex and porn and love addiction from a mixture of talk therapy and somatic work and the 12 steps. Going to the meetings, going to the conventions and all that. And so for me, the easiest way to break it down is powerlessness and unmanageability, which again is straight from 12 steps. So if I'm powerless, if I cannot stop, whether the pings, I call them, like a sonar ping, or the, what do you call it? Whatever the pull, whatever the temptation, whatever the trigger, if I can't stop it, if I'm just powerless, and it doesn't matter to what effect, I'm at work, I'm at home, I need to take a break, I take a left turn instead of a right to go, pick up a sex worker, like whatever, however it manifests, porn, sex, cheating. Some people identify as fantasy addicts, where they're just in their head all day and cannot let go of the fantasy, the cartoon-sized fantasy of a relationship with someone they could never possibly have one with. Then that's part one of the definition. Are you powerless? Can you not stop? And let me give a little anecdote of my own. Before I got sober, I was on, I won't say what production, because they'll come back and kick my ass, because we're all a tight community here. I know. I've been no, there's a really tight knit community out here in Albuquerque. You may have heard it. It's like the Hollywood of the Southwest. And I did a lot of production work out here too, after my development work in LA. And on one of the last shows before I got sober, I was losing my mind. I could not concentrate on my work. And I would keep clicking. Two things happened. I almost decided one day to act out in the loft that I had all to myself, and all the execs were downstairs or on set. And I could go into this separate room and I could handle my business if I wanted to. Now, I never did. And I'd probably tell you if I did. I mean, this work is based on honesty and clarity and and everything. But I almost acted out and was like, whoa, this is really taking me over. And then one time I was clicking around with the producers and writers in an office right behind me, where if they looked through the window, they could see what I was doing. That's powerlessness. Like the addiction didn't give a fuck that I could lose everything. I mean, they could, not sue me or anything. I mean, I could have gotten in serious trouble, maybe even legal trouble. And then the unmanageability is what I call the wake of the boat. That's powerlessness. So if powerlessness, like I can't stop, if that's the motorboat going along the river, unmanageability is the wake. Now I lost my job. Now I've lost my health. I'm not sleeping. I'm not eating. Maybe I'm mixing drugs into it. I'm lying. So there's obviously the deleterious behavioral, the corrosion of your behavior, your mores, your rules, your boundaries, everything thrown out the window. And so, yeah, you lose your family, you lose your job, you have some, horrible health demerits, health issues as a result, physically or emotionally or psychologically. So
Right.
that is my definition: is can you not stop powerlessness? And also, is it unmanageable now where you're not paying your bills? You forgot to go pick up the baby. Your schedule is blown out the window. I lost jobs. Not those studio jobs, but I would freelance. I try to freelance in between work, and I wouldn't make deadlines, because I was
Right.
stuck clicking all day or watching movies all day.
Right. So I totally want to get into the juicy stories, but before we get into that, rewind for a second. So what I'm really curious about is the childhood development. So for example, when did you talk to your parents about sex, for example?
It's really weird. There's a strange dichotomy, or there's this strange divide, yeah, between how my parents seemed, and then when it comes to important stuff like talking about sex and drugs and rock and roll. Actually, so my best friends to this day, I'm in touch with 6 high school buddies. So we have this wonderful, almost lifelong. We knew each other from 11,
Mhm.
12 on. We still are in touch. They remember my mother as the one when we would go out to parties or go on a road trip or whatever in high school and even in college. She was like, "Don't forget to use your condoms," right? Like she was very sensible,
Interesting.
very, very, very liberal. On the
Okay.
other hand, it was, my father's porn stash that got me into the addiction. It was just mainlined, and it was availed. I'll say that. It's hard talking about it now because he passed not long ago. Before I used to be like, a lot of people when my dad passed were like, "Are you all right? Your relationship with him was, faceted, multifaceted to say the least, right? The nicest way they could put it." But when he passed, I was at peace. We had a
Mm,
peaceful partying, and I'm very grateful. I visited him, fed him because he'd had a stroke, and when he was gone a week after I saw him last, I had a sense of peace. But a lot of the stories that I've shared like this, or at retreats or at conventions, in front of, tens or hundreds of other sex addicts, you would think it was like a Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker kind of dynamic. And a lot of the time in the past, my anger made it so, my resentment made it so. But I've let a
mm.
lot of that go. Coaching itself has helped, much less the therapy and the 12-step to go with it. So it was availed to me very early on, probably almost right after we met when I was about 9. And that forever, as you can imagine, being in the work that you do, forever changed the course of my psychological, emotional, sexual, and even physical development. I mean, it's pretty pervasive what can happen if you get hooked.
Right. Okay. So your parents did not come forward to talk to you about it, but from the outside, it seemed like your mother was very progressive, saying, "Go use condoms, kids."
Yeah, like they were open about, do you use condoms? Are you having sex yet? What are you doing? Are you dating? I remember the first time I, made out like full on, adult kissing, French kissing and all that. I was in like 8th grade and stayed up all night at this slumber party, and my best friend's cousin and I made out, and I came home and I had like a hickey on my neck. I was so embarrassed. And my mom caught it immediately. She was like, "What is that on your neck?" She's like, "One, you're here. It's like 1 in the afternoon. We thought you were gonna be back at like 9 a.m. 2, what is that on your neck?" I was like, "Oh, fuck, that's embarrassing." So I was mortified. So there was always a lot of talk, open talk, but that does not sort of a lesson make, right? It's
Right.
it's it's the difference between sitting down and going like, "What do you need to know? What do you want to know? Here's what I can tell you. Here's what I can't quite yet because of your age or whatever. Sure, you got the curiosity." I have broken a cycle with my own kids because I don't know why it was availed to me when it was. I don't know about, my father's past. I know parts of my mother's, but it's also a different generational thing. So with
Right.
my kids, I have always said, whatever you want to ask, please ask. It's better to ask and sort of risk the embarrassment, than not, and then you're coming back and we're already dealing with an STI or a pregnancy, or
Right.
you guys don't even, their generation, they're Gen Zers, I guess, 16 and 17, almost 18. They're thank God they're steeped in like consent and a very different set of rules and rules of engagement, with sex and even courting and dating. So great. But I have always on top of that been like, just talk, because as liberal, like you're saying, as liberal as it sounds like my family was, there was a lot of reticence when you're getting like right down to it, fortunately. So
Right. So, the stash that you discovered from I'm gonna go and say stepfather, but your adopted father. Tell me, do you remember that moment? Like, was it two
yes.
o'clock? Were you okay? Take me through
Yes.
it.
Ooh, wow. You're asking. Wow, that's a good one. And my only, and again, my hesitation is just because his passing is so new, but this is
Right.
already on record. I've written about it. I've done other interviews about it. I felt very unsafe at friends of the family's home, and I'm a writer, so I can like describe. It was sort of like jaundiced, yellow colored, beige colored interior of this home, and my mom's close friends, her girlfriend and her girlfriend's husband. The husband was abusive and always felt like a human pit bull. Like I never really interacted with him much. I was probably averting my eyes from him. And so it was sort of a weird, funky scene, and everyone's drinking. So that's a huge. So let me explain that. There's a lot of alcoholism in my family. My mother's generation, her siblings, lots of drinking. She quit when I was 12, but her siblings, and then my generation, we've dealt with that variably, and I'm not gonna. They were partying, and just at some point, um, he made some kind of joke, and there was a magazine either out or I don't know. I don't know if I discovered it, if it was out, but it was just like, oh, what do you think of this? And I didn't know what to think of it because I was fucking 9 years old. So I was, and it just, I remember just feeling a little odd. And yeah, and that's
Mm,
it. But the setting is what's important. The sort of fear and loathing of the setting, the discomfort of adults drinking. And I was used to doing my own thing because again, my siblings didn't come along till 12 and 11 years old. And I would always occupy myself with drawing or writing. I was a big comic book fan, which I still am with my kids. We're all MCU and all the movies now and everything. And my son collects comic books now, just like I did. So I would always occupy myself. And for some reason, I was insinuated for that moment. And it was literally like a baton pass, like, oh, here's the porn. And I was like, what the fuck is this? And yeah. Um, I don't remember the next step. I just, at some point within the next few months, it had to be, I had found the stash. And what's so interesting
mm,
is now we talk about a stash in like 12 step and therapy and coaching as a figurative one. So it's like whatever your stash is it porn? Is it heroin? Is it your alcohol? Whatever, where are you hiding your stash? Before you have your epiphany, before you have your rock bottom moment, and flip it and try to work toward recovery and healthfulness and spirituality. But yeah, there was a literal stash, and I would raid that closet all the time. As soon as someone was gone from the home, I went right there in a little bubble of my own with the creative work. And then the other bubble was the porn when I would go sneak into it.
right. So, when you were shown this first magazine, had you already discovered masturbation, or did that come after?
God damn, you're asking some questions. So
Because I'm curious about these
no,
things.
it's
Like,
great.
I Google and
Well,
I try to find how like the story goes for
well,
people.
you fucking found it.
Yeah.
The the so I think this is only anecdotal. I think I'm an outlier as far as porn or sex addicts when it comes to masturbation. And this is really interesting. As an adult, to porn, masturbated furiously. And let me give you a little anecdote that I always give too. It started out with the magazine that was put in front of me. Then, of course, and there was reel to reel. There was some reel to reel in the closet as well. And then eventually VHS came, and then you're
Right.
renting or buying porn, and then I'm looking into that stash. And then 98, 99, 2000 with the internet. And once it could start uploading images and video, it was like going from cocaine to crack. And I've never done either, but I imagine that's what it was like. The compounding, the access was just, what is it called? Just like a tenfold, intake change, just overwhelming the senses with the addiction.
Right.
So
Wait, so
it's,
hold on, pause right there for a second.
yeah.
Your experience is interesting because you're able to compare from that like physical having to have a magazine and then the transition with technology where it's like it's just all the time. Whereas now younger guys, that's all they've known to have all these
Mhm.
thousands of women in one day. Again, whereas you had maybe five magazines at one time. So it's interesting because you're in that middle where you saw that transition happen.
Yeah, and I have some people say that pity is a pejorative, but it's not. I have compassion. If we don't want to say pity, I have compassion for the younger millennials after my
Right.
generation, and certainly the Z's. Like, I mean, you could have it on your phone. Our phones are with us. People who don't, from my generation, we remember, rotary phones. So right
Right.
before cordless and then cell. So but now, so you have contact 24/7 if you want,
Yeah.
and to
Right.
be a 10-year-old or 11 or 12 and have that temptation. Now, I'm not saying every single kid is tempted to do that, but every single kid is from 10 to whatever, 18, 19, 25, going through the whole adolescent process, frontal lobe exploding. And I feel bad for the access. And that's why I'm here. Like, I have no, I'll talk to anyone at any level, any generation who is having an issue there, because I will try to remember the thread. You asked about masturbation, but one last little anecdote about the generational thing. I was a Gen X managing at this, I'll just say customer service. I don't want to say what the store was, but I was managing a store, and the employees were millennials, and they knew I didn't do porn. I was sober. I was already in 12 step by then, and they didn't know the details of my life. I didn't share that. I never outed myself then, but they just knew. I was like, don't, because they would come by with their phone, be like, hey, look at this. And I was like, dude, I don't do that. And they never
Mm.
asked that. They presumed maybe it was religious or just a moral thing or what. I don't care what the presumption was. I said, I don't do that. I don't look at porn. So just like, don't put your phone right in front of my face with, TNA all over it or whatever. I'm not interested. And they actually respected that. We locked horns on some other things, but it was really telling. And it was way before I was a coach. Two of the guys came up at different times on their own and just started to share about, oh, I got this girlfriend, this and that. And man, I'm having a hard time getting it up. And this is a guy who's
Right.
like 23, 22,
Right.
early
Right.
20s, right? Barely out of their teens. And he's like, I think
Right.
it's a porn. I was like, I know it is. I said, and
Right.
so I said, just get help, like try to, get a therapist and work it out. I said, the more you keep downloading and hitting that one, neural pathway, you're withering. The other one's withering on the vine, and you're going to be in front of your girl, like you're saying, and not being able to perform, no matter how much you want her or dig her. And yeah, two of
Right.
them admitted that. And that was completely unsolicited. So I was like, is this a sign? It's just the universe like telling me to get in and start talking to people about this and listening to them. So
Absolutely.
yeah. And then the
Yeah.
masturbation thing, sorry.
No, okay. So did you answer that? Okay.
I
So
didn't, but I can't believe I kept track of that. I'm ADHD as fuck. So the fact that I remember, I'm an outlier, I was saying earlier,
yeah.
because I only masturbated as an adult. So if you can fucking imagine, I was raised Catholic. I'm a cafeteria Catholic now. It's like pick and choose whatever I want or don't want, and I throw away the
Oh, I
rest,
like
right?
that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So, but it's similar to also being a Black American. You gotta like pick and choose. That's a whole other thing. We won't go into politics here or social justice, but it's similar. So I'm a cafeteria Catholic, but back then I was very devout, and there's a lot of course, guilt that's utilized. And for some reason, I didn't touch myself into my late teens, even though I was acting out. And I've had like,
Interesting.
yeah, a partner in the past, maybe my ex-wife or maybe my current girlfriend was like, what? Wait, you had all that porn from say 9 to like 16 and never touched yourself? I was like, no, I was essentially, I guess, blue balling for like 7 years or something. And so that tension, like God knows what I got to go talk to, I have a colleague friend, Mary McDonald. You should interview her. She's a trauma specialist, and she's part
Interesting.
of John Kim, the angry therapist, like the whole sort of posse of us, the whole cohort, right? And I want to talk with her. I was like, what was I doing to my body cells that whole time? What kind of tension trauma is like stuck in my, like what somatically is going on? Because I just would, and there's no release. So what the, I can't even,
Would you get a boner when you would be
yeah,
watching
yeah,
porn?
of course I'd be titillated. Yeah, of course. But then,
Interesting.
and then I think it would just ebb. I would, go through, I've seen this, like you were saying, there's the magazines, like 5 magazines versus endless like clicks online. So I would just get through the five.
Ah.
And then maybe 2 weeks later, there'd be like 3 more added to the stash. Okay, now I've got the new stash that dad got. Okay. All right. Or the new movie or whatever, and go through it, but no release. Steph, I have
Fast.
no
That's
idea what I was doing to my brain or body.
I'm
For,
well, if for when you speak to her, I'm curious, or when I speak to her, then if I have your approval, then I'm gonna ask her to.
yeah, go for it. See if there's some kind of court. There's got to be some kind of, I mean, the tension is furious, you know? I mean,
Interesting.
how is there no release? I think I was just scared. I also developed very late. So for a while there, I probably could not have ejaculated, like physically, like very, I mean, I was 4'11" as a freshman in high school. So and I was younger because I skipped a grade. So 17, 16, 15, 14, I was 14 as a freshman. So if it was getting close to when, boys in general are furiously like, working it out, I don't even know that my body would have been ready for it anyway. So
Interesting. Okay, so
isn't that
you
weird?
said
I
that
know
is
it's weird.
it's fascinating. Okay, so then I'm curious. Did you have sex for the first? You of course then masturbated eventually in your late teens before you lost your virginity.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
I did
so
barely,
then
but yeah.
what encouraged you then to finally masturbate? Did you have your guy friends, your group of 6 guys like that you said are like, oh man, have you ever done this before?
I'm sure we had those conversations, and I remember in junior high denying it, and everyone thought I was lying. I was like, "No, I don't jack off." Like, what do you? No, they're like, "You're weird," but it's damned if you do. It's like seventh grade. Like the girls are like, "Oh, sure, you don't." And I'm like, "No, I don't." And they're like, "Well, that's weird." I'm like, "Okay, so I'm fucked either way." But either way, in high
Right.
school, so I didn't lose my virginity till freshman year of college, and I think in my peer group, it was right around the same time, senior year, late junior year, freshman year of college. Um, and I don't know how it worked out that way. We've laughed about that, but sure they were talking about it. I just didn't have a point of reference, and I think I can't tell you the exact. I have a vague memory, and it's just fuck it. No one's home. Let me try this. I mean, my body's just. By the time you're 16, 17, now it's not like, little teen, it's like, young man teen. And I think I finally just was like, oh, this is what everyone's talking about. Now let me go, clean up and do some laundry. But yeah, it was
Right.
wild.
So what then was I curious about
Said
as
something about
well?
virginity, I think.
Yeah, no, so you lost your virginity as a senior. No, sorry, as a junior. I'm even making you as even
Freshman in high school or college.
freshman in college. So I'm
It was
curious about.
terrible.
I mean, I can make assumptions, but I'm curious about what was the community and the society's opinion towards sex and yeah, I guess masturbation. Like, did you have this generalized story where guys in the locker room like, oh, did you see this woman or did you hook up there? Like, what was the societal
So
archetype or shadow?
it's an interesting question because yes, we were all talking about it. Yes, we all wanted it. Actresses, the girls in our class, of course. I mean, for the guys who were, straight, the guys in our class for the guys who weren't. So there's kind of two answers. One is as far as porn, that was my secret, which is a
Mm,
hallmark of addiction,
right.
right? I remember once inviting a friend, or maybe he stopped by, a good friend stopped by, and I was already like had the video in, was like, hey, you want to check it out? Was kind of playing it off, but it wasn't fun. It wasn't like, oh yeah, now we're like having this bonding experience if we're watching people like fuck each other. It was totally awkward for me. He was like, oh, whatever,
Mm,
and I have no idea. I have no idea even to this day what his history with porn was, other than we did mention in the last couple of years. I was like, man, that time was really kind of weird. I played porn at my place for you, and you were just like, yeah, all right. And then we just never talked about it again. And yeah, it was more awkwardness, but because it's like,
mm,
what it reminds me of is it Gollum, right? Lord of the Rings, like my precious, like you're just trying to keep that little stash all to yourself, and you'll do anything to defend it and lie about it or deny it or whatever. So I never shared it with the dudes. It was my own thing. They probably knew like later on about it. My friends, when I was in my 20s in LA, right before I had this sort of turning point that we can talk about later, knew that I was not addicted. They were just like, oh, it's his thing. Because I didn't even know I was addicted. I just was not dating much and relying on porn instead. And again, this was when the internet blew up. So, but the outside view from an addict's point of view was the shame that we usually feel when we're like, oh, I don't want anyone to know about this. This is my own little private hell. Don't feel
Right.
like, well,
So with the shame aspect that, of course, you mentioned that is associated or one of the signs of someone who is participating in an addictive like behaviors. Do you think you pick that up because you noticed that your father was hiding it as well? So you're like, oh, this is a thing that we're supposed to hide.
that is a fucking excellent question. I mean, you're kind of almost asking just nature nurture. Is my brain telling me, ooh, this is weird or off or whatever? Or is it the societal thing? Because, oh, those are dad's mags
Right.
and I'm sneaking in and he probably shouldn't have shown me. Well, and there was also conflicting
Right.
messages because my mom, when like the one or two times she did catch me, she's like, you don't go there. You don't do that. I'm like, yeah, but dad is. And you're okay with
Right.
that? Like, I'm
Right.
immediately, I mean, I'm not dumb either. Even if I'm 10 or 11, I kind of have a wit. And I'm like,
Right.
well, wait, but you
That doesn't
realize,
add up.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, why am I getting in trouble? But I would say the addictive part of it is a big part of the shame. Like once I knew that I didn't know. I refer to being in it and not knowing as like Plato's cave. Like I have no idea that I'm chained, to the ground, looking at the cave wall and just seeing images of reality, right? Which is very much the porn experience. If you keep with the visual element of it, right? I have no idea that if I were unchained and took off the blinders and went outside the cave, there's this whole world out there. And I think there's something intuitive, but the shame just, or egoic, the shame just kicks up. And it's like, well, you're doing this and everyone's talking about dating and screwing, because I mean, kids were having sex by sophomore, junior year, even back in the, late 80s, early 90s. I mean, duh, like teenagers, it's what teenagers do. It's what we want to do. So I think there's shame built in because it's like, oh, why did I stay up in the room for an hour and not and was late to the party? Again, that's the unmanageability. Now I'm late to the party. Now I'm late to dinner. Now everyone's like, where the fuck were you? I'm like, oh, nothing. It's
Right.
fine. So you're already making up stories and it's like a calcifying effect, right? Or not calcifying. It's like building up a wall. I want more and more distance from having to explain it and still being in the center of all those walls, that labyrinth almost, and just have my little stash. And then
Right.
on top of that, yeah, like the weird reinforcement with my mom, or even I don't know if my dad ever said anything directly about it. My mom was like, you can't do that. And I'm like, but why? That's you know that if we can do an argument about this, like I'm gonna win. This doesn't even make sense. Like you're
Right.
contradicting yourself. Why didn't you tell me in the
Right.
first go or when I was 9 or 10? Like this, we gotta talk about this. It's a problem. They didn't.
So when you had sex for the first time, do you remember thinking like this is amazing and or oh, but that porn and masturbation is better?
It was neither. I've told this well to friends. Oh my God. I don't want to
Well, we're
embarrass
all
anybody or
friends
myself.
here.
Yeah, we're all friends here. I have a joke. I have a good friend in production and we were sharing our war stories and we were laughing our asses off. We're about the same age. I'm gonna be 50 this year. And she's like in her late 40s. And we were laughing our asses off because we were talking about those early awkward experiences. And my first was terrible. It was terrible. I was so nervous. It's like it was like this being pulled apart. I was gonna use that Kylo Ren reference because I'm such a stupid geek. Being pulled in two directions because I wanted it so badly. I wanted to finally lose my virginity so badly, and had this woman who was a year or two older in college. She was either a sophomore or junior at the time, so I was like, "Woo!" But once it got to it, if I'm 18 and about to lose my virginity and I've been in the porn hole for 11 years, I mean, my development is fucked. My nervous system's
Mm,
fucked. My emotional development is fucked. So it was hard to even be present, which is what addiction takes away, right? You just lose hours,
mm,
days, months, years. So it's hard to be present. It was hard to get it up and keep it up. And I attributed some of that to my nerves because the first time. But again, also that's the pulling apart. But also I was like, no, but I want this. I want this. And that is
right.
part of the recovery process too, is like, how do I relearn? So rather than just talk about the problem, we can talk about the recovery as well. How do I relearn to be with a flesh and blood person, heart to heart, body to body, mind to mind, and appreciate that? And then what's really tough is that middle part of the transition into recovery, like basically what happened with my marriage was like my recovery didn't save my marriage, but it saved my life. And we had a
Mm,
very good divorce and we co-parent and we talk things out openly and we're friends. But there was a point where I was in recovery, but had done so much emotional damage that
mm,
it was like I do want to do this, but I'm still learning. It's like I'm 9. It's like, or not 9, that's bad, but it's like I'm 13, 14, 15 all over again. When I might have been experiencing these sexual
Right.
Activity, behaviors, patterns. I'm now 30 something, or when I'm losing my virginity with my ex-wife, or when I'm losing my virginity, I'm 18, and I'm like, well, fuck. So it was confounding.
When the addiction or the abuse of this thing comes before the actual real life experience, like you don't have the comparison of what it was like without that, like how it could be. I don't want to say should, but how it could be.
So
Mm,
even if I'm not in recovery, people don't tend to say recovered, but even if I'm not acting out an active addiction anymore, it goes quiet, could go quiet for months or years. Then it
right.
could be coupled with depression or anxiety or an incident and explode again and use it as a resort. So we had our kids when I was 31 and 32, got married when I was 34, 35, got divorced almost a year after because of I mean, my part 1,000% is the addiction. It started to get really combative where I knew there was a problem by then for sure, but didn't know what the fuck to do with it, and had a couple of therapists, but they weren't addiction specialists. I tried 12-step once in that early period and ran for the hills. I was like, what the fuck was that? I hated it. And to be
Right.
honest, I'll tell you the reason why it was a mixed meeting, and it was for sex addicts, but it was mixed gender. And so hearing stories from women being a straight cisgendered male, I was like, all this is doing is making me want to act out more. And that's and
Right.
that can or cannot be the case. And that's not to shit on 12-step at all. I root for the efficacy of 12-step all the time. A lot of people have issues, or some people have issues with it. Not me. But I think you should. I'm militant about it. I really appreciate it, but I'm not, like fundamentalist. Like it's not for everyone, but I think it was very effective for me. So
Okay.
I tout it. So I was, early 30s, father, married, divorced, stuck it out for another year or so. And in that year, I got sober, but we still decided to divorce.
Okay, so
So
pause. So this was going on all throughout your 20s. You were having your experiences. Some were not that enjoyable, like your first, and then some were. And then when you got together with your wife, ex-wife, but the mother of your children, when you got into that relationship, were you already aware that this was an issue, or were you still in denial?
it was, no, it was huge, and I knew
Okay.
it. And I really liked her. We really clicked. We were running around LA having a great time, and she's 6 years younger than me, so she was in her late 20s. I was in my early 30s, and we're both Sagittarians. We both come from some difficult family shit. So there's a lot of simpatico and just similar energy.
Right.
We're both creative. She was an actor, singer, dancer, and then became an entrepreneur. So we vibed really well, but I was terrified the whole time. There's an analogy I use, but I'll just be a little more literal. It doesn't matter how socially adept I appeared. And now, almost 50, I'm like, I'm socially adept as fuck. I can talk to any, I got a good type A. I can embrace all that. But back then, it was a front. It was like, I'm going to put out this part of me that I think I can use. But right behind that, right behind my eyes, I'm fucking terrified.
Mm,
I'm filled to the brim with shame. I know what I've been doing. Can they tell? Can they smell it? Can they see it? Can they
mm,
feel it? Can they vibe on it?
mm-hmm.
Literally one time we were supposed to go out and meet friends, and we lived in the same apartment. I've told this story before, on different floors, and she would just come and go, and I would do the same. And she came and hit a locked door, and thank God it was locked, because right on the other side, I was, getting out some acting out before we were supposed to go out and have dinner and meet friends or whatever. So again, the powerlessness, the way it would just like mug you, just jumps you, is incredible. So no,
Mm,
I was terrified when I met her, because we really clicked, and all I was thinking was, oh, I'm gonna fuck this up. How do I hide this huge issue? And at some point, of course, it came to the fore.
right, which we're gonna get to. But so it was obviously continuing to be an issue, but you hadn't admitted it or acknowledged it yet. But and of course I want you to respect her and her own privacy. But you guys being intimate, was it because of all this chemistry and the similarities? Did things seem like did you convince yourself, oh, it's not going to be an issue in this relationship because it started off strong at the beginning and then it went in the same direction that they always end up going?
I had issues on and off, both emotionally and physically, to be frank, the entire time. And early on, I probably just played it off. Oh, I'm nervous. Oh, I'm this, or I'm distracted. And then
Right.
once it all came out that I was an addict and it was porn and it was this and that, it was like, oh, that's what, and that's so damaging for the partner. Like, oh, that's what it
Right.
was? Fuckhead. I thought it was me. Like you made it feel like it was me, or I wasn't doing something right. I wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't this enough. It's
Right.
devastating for the partner's morale, of course.
Right.
And I want to explain one little thing about my awareness of it all. My sobriety date is like mid-November. I don't have an exact day. I just know it was in the middle of the month. That's when I went to 12-step, when I was at that job where I was considering acting out on the job. And my marriage was nuking. And I called the old therapist back in LA from Albuquerque and was like, everything's falling apart. And she was like, get a fucking therapist, get to 12-step, listen to me, listen to someone who knows better. I call that old therapist every year on my anniversary. And I said, thank you.
Oh.
And she said, listen to someone who knows better than you and do X, Y, and Z now. Because she'd been telling me for years. I was kind of sexually anorexic, which is still a part of the addiction. It's just the other end of the spectrum. So I wasn't dating, wasn't availing myself, and was miserable. And I sat in my room and I thought, something's wrong.
Mm.
This is not healthy. This is not normal. It finally clicked because I kept going to it. When I wanted to write, when I wanted to date, when I wanted to work, when I wanted to get something accomplished, I'd be sitting there at my desk with all the time in the world as a young man in his 20s, and I couldn't do anything. I had to keep clicking on porn instead. And I just stopped,
Mm.
and everyone like that, drinking, weed, food. We had this great apartment in Marina Del Rey. One of the old high school buddies and I ended up becoming roommates in LA, and we bopped around, but we were in Marina Del Rey, this beautiful apartment for a while. So it was like our hub. Everyone came there, and I had my door locked and closed and was like, holy shit. I don't want to fuck with anyone today. This is a problem. This is scary.
Mm.
It would be almost a decade before I would get straight, but I always celebrate that day because I was kind of coming out of Plato's cave a little bit. It was the awareness, if not the means or the know-how to like, okay, what do I do to get out of this? I still don't even call myself an addict. I just said that this is a problem. What do I do
Right.
about it? I have no fucking idea.
Right. So, what's your perspective on, because you described yourself as being an artist, kind of like in your world, creating and writing. Have you found or seen that people that are more introverted end up turning towards the porn addiction side, and people that are more extroverted are going towards like sex addiction, going out and sleeping with people a lot, prostitutes and all that?
I don't have any data that would back that up. And I'd even be hard pressed to find anecdotally an answer to that. I don't think it discriminates.
So then with your marriage, when was what was the peak, or what were some of these really big, devastating things that happened that resulted in you finally getting more help and then your divorce?
The coming from where we both came from, on top of what I was bringing into the addiction that I was bringing into the relationship, addiction has to be abetted by lies and deception, self-deception, and deceiving the partner.
Mhm.
There wasn't a word for gaslighting back even just a decade ago, and that's totally fucking what happens over and over and over again. So I
Mm.
would deny wrongdoing, even though I was caught red-handed a number of times, many times, and would just
Watching
promise.
porn specifically.
Or the electronic trail would be found, the cache, oh, this, what were you doing at 11? I found it. I saw it. I was looking for a file of mine. I fucking found a porn file in there, photos, or, I think I even saved photos on the hard drive. Like I would rip them from online. The insanity, that
Right.
well-worn meme now, right? Insanity is trying to do the same thing over and over again,
Over
but
and over
expecting
again.
different results. It really is that. So I lied over and over again. I denied over and over again. I said I'd get help over and over again. We did go to, we put out the stops, especially once I was sober. We did a Catholic thing, and though neither of us is, it's more, we were just trying anything, right? We were still going to do the cafeteria thing. We're like, that thing that they said the other day was bullshit. But we tried everything. We tried group 12-step, which is difficult. That's tough. Like couples 12-step, that's fucking tough. I'd rather just, anyway, I like how, you have the Al-Anons or the Narcanons. They also have like COSA and groups like that where the partners can get help. The partners affected by the addiction can get help. So same kind of thing. But so all of it, several different
Mhm.
therapists, etc. And then finally just knew that the crucial thing at the end, if I can skip ahead to the end, was that we weren't ourselves with each other anymore and couldn't find a way to get that back. So
Mm,
if we're always living, and this is more her point of view, and I know that she knows that I talk about these things, but still, I mean, she could probably nuance it better, of course. But it was, I'm just not myself, and I don't know how to get that back because it's been ruined. It's been taken from me. Right? It's
mm,
like I robbed her of that. So that's when it was like, okay, and it was we were crying and we were sad and upset, and it was also kind of almost a relief because it's like, okay, we can pivot away from this, beating our head against the wall, trying anything to salvage it, and it just didn't work. So the
mm.
great news is, again, we are excellent divorcees. She's remarried. We co-parent the kids. We all hung out. I didn't do much dating the last couple of years. It was often just 5 of us. That if it was just us for holidays or breakfasts or brunches or whatever. So we get on well. And when people be like, "You guys are so cute. Why the fuck you get on? So why are you divorced?" We're like, "We get along because we're divorced. Like we're not one of those acrimonious. I've done podcasts on divorce with this coach in Canada, Amy Brown, who's great. This mindfulness coach and relationship coach. And thank God we're not one of those venomous, rancorous divorcees. We know we got to work together, and we like each other. Besides, I mean, we love each other, but
Yeah.
as friends and as parents.
Yeah. I mean, thank goodness too for your children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it sounds like though in that relationship is when you finally admitted that you have an addiction. I mean, it sounds like as well because you had a marriage and children that were on the line.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I was destroying them. And
Were you resistant to admitting that? Like, did she kind of come in and say, "No, this is serious," and you're like, "No, no, 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 no"? Then finally, or were you like when you got caught red-handed the fifth time? You're like, "Okay, let's do something about this."
it's sort of a combination. There's a lot of denial, like I said, where I was like, no, no, no. It wasn't denial that I was an addict. It was a denial that I could handle it on my own. Like or not denial. I was fooling myself that I was like, I could just kept promising, which, become immediate lies the next time you act out again. It's really sad
Right?
and terrible for the partner.
Isn't it called white knuckling when you think you can just handle it on your own?
Well, you can even white knuckle when you're in recovery if you're just having a fucking shitty day and the tools aren't working like they ought to, like you usually expect them to. And you're just like, okay. And you got to use a little more willpower, which is not really a 12-step way and not really a mindful way. But yes, white knuckling. Yeah. I would just be like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And then I click. And then the wave of shame and self-loathing and, oh, fuck, I'm going to be in trouble again. And let me delete my tracks. Like she caught me that one time.
Mm.
So much stress and energy and anxiety is balled up. And one thing that I talk to my clients about now that I'm coaching, I'm like, if you can just get open to the idea, it's like the devil, if you can just get open to the idea, the pain and discomfort of the unknown aspects of recovery, what you don't know where you can go to this much healthier path, but you're scared because you're used to the comfort, right? The sort of a blanket of the addiction. But at some point, that blanket's gonna become barbed wire, and there's gonna be a lot of that unmanageability, a lot of wake, a lot of flotsam in the wake, a lot of jobs and relationships broken. If you can trust the discomfort of getting into recovery rather than stay with the discomfort of the addiction, it's like comfortable discomfort, then we're on our way. But it's so hard to get out of it. So yeah,
Right.
I kept white knuckling and going, I got this, and I didn't. And I've shared this before. I had a rage issue that went right alongside the addiction, which was also bequeathed from family. And I had to get both of those. Like furniture was thrown, and it was a terrible day. And that's when I called my furniture was thrown, like it flew across. I don't know why. In that instance, I just used a passive voice. I threw fucking furniture. She was screaming. The kids were very young, but at least privy to it, like down the hallway, could at least hear it if they couldn't see it. And they don't remember any of that, but it's in their psyche somewhere. And unfortunately, and I always offer, like, if you ever anything comes up, again, I'm the dad who's like, anything you want to talk about, just bring it up. Better than holding it in. But anyway, it was after one of those huge battles, because we would get physical and we would get very ugly, verbally and emotionally, like really cut each other. And it was after one of those, I was like, I can't take this anymore. I know it's my fault, but I can't stop. What do I do? And it's that conversation I already told you about with the old therapist.
Did the extent of your addiction, did it stop at porn, or was it also sex and love?
cheated. I probably had one emotional, not even an affair. I just got really curious about someone at one point, and I think I admitted to it, if not at the time, later on, but no calls, no dates, nothing like that. Just definitely getting pulled out of, felt like I was getting pulled out of my relationship, but it was still just the addiction. It was because my relationship was falling apart and I'm not taking responsibility for it yet because I haven't, hit bottom or had the, epiphany yet. And so I'm like, oh my God, what the fuck? Like, nah. And I did veer away, but kind of after being called out. And but no, for me and my history of acting out, it was unhealthy sex, like those guys who asked me, the young guys who asked me about their sex lives or shared about their sex lives. I wouldn't choose not to use a condom or whatever because I couldn't get it up because it's like the whole, oh, I got to adult and be safe and be this. This isn't like a porn. This isn't what my body and
Right.
mind want to do. It's like it's terrible. It's like you're trained unhealthily by the porn, which is why all these sites and all the info you read, it's like, be sure to tell them it's not sex ed. It's you can call it entertainment, you can call it whatever you want, but it's not sex ed. It's not the real thing. And my brain was convinced otherwise. So yeah, unhealthy relationships, porn, and unhealthy sexual encounters. But like not prostitution or anything like that. Just encounters, just dating or whatever. Shitty.
You know what's interesting? The emotional part that you said some could or might call it cheating or micro cheating. What is your opinion on people whose addiction is more focused on porn than how they behave in a monogamous relationship towards, I guess, lusting or gawking out people out on the streets if you're with your partner? Did any of that go on, or do you have people that you're working with?
I know of people who have those issues and they manage it individually in their relationships. So like some men that I've worked with in particular, that is a big deal in the relationship because even if it's not, say they were cheating, say they were chronic cheaters, it'll be a massive trigger for the partner if they get caught swivel necking, and it'll bring up all the old shit that they've supposedly gone through. So that
Right.
becomes a part of their recovery. And like, so there are different shades, grades, levels, right? And I'm using 12-step sort of terminology and framing. So one framework is bottom line, middle line, top line. One framework is circles. Inner circle is off limits. Middle circle would be like the gawking. That's a red flag, right? It's not losing your sobriety. It's not cheating on the partner, but it's like, don't keep doing that. Don't be an asshole, right? Just be a little mature. And at the same time, I will tell you this is totally fucking anecdotally true. Every spring, all these, whether it's in my groups or whether it's 12-step or whatever, everyone brings up, people are taking their clothes off now. It's warming up. Our bodies are warming up. Our systems are warming up. Our eyes, our genitals, the temperature. And it's a thing every year. And it's because this is the behavioral addiction that we are steeped in. This is what we have been working on, and it's only natural, but it's difficult for recovering addicts because now I'm going to go to the beach with my family. Now we're going to go out and everyone is wearing, is midriff or, and it doesn't matter what your gender preference or sexual preference, none of that matters. It's just, how can I manage, being in public, people watching, ads. You gotta realize, like for me, we met on IG, on Instagram. That could be a fucking minefield for me to this day.
Ooh, my Instagram, in my opinion, is soft porn, which is why I got rid of my personal Instagram and I just use it for work.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know another thought on this? I was in New York, a couple weeks ago, and there was a taxi, and they had an ad on top of the taxi, and it was like an underwear ad, but it was a woman's ass. Her ass looked good, and I was like, damn, that's gonna be hard for people that are struggling. Like
It is.
it could be a trigger. Then you run inside or you go to a bar
Mm-hmm.
or a prostitute, whatever. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, yeah.
That's a distinction. That's to highlight a distinction too between a behavioral or processing addiction and a substance one. Because this is not taken away from anyone's substance abuse recovery, alcoholics, drug, pills, whatever. It's not easy no matter fucking what. And my heart goes out, and we are brothers and sisters and persons in recovery together, 12-step. But we have to work in the behavioral area because it's more akin to sex and love addiction and codependence. It's more akin to, even though eating is a substance, you have to eat, even though sex or porn or love or lusting or that relationship damage, whatever intimacy issue is being dealt with there. Like, we need intimacy, whether it's physical or emotional, psychological, whatever. So we have to find a way to mitigate and manage, but not suppress. It's not about being a monk. It's not about, saying no forever to sex. It's about healthy sexuality. How can I even the keel to where I'm not fucking swivel necking? I'm living here in the present. I'm with my partner. We're out on the town, going to dinner. We're connected as healthily as any relationship can be. We're not talking Disney. I'm not talking like Pollyanna, anything. All relationships, you got to put in work, even if it's two non-addicts coming together. Intimacy is intimacy. It's vulnerable. We're dealing with intimacy, honesty, trust, vulnerability. So when you're an addict and that's what's broken, it's like you try to get those parts back. You try to heal those and surrender the old compulsions and impulses, which now through experience and recovery and therapy, you accept that this is a part of you, that it was a maladaptation for whatever reason, whether in my case it's like abuse or neglect or having to put right in front of you, or whether it's a pattern of bad unhealthy relationships that set a template for you, and now that's just the same treadmill you're on. I call it the new face same asshole syndrome. That's what we have to do when we're behavioral addicts, is get out there and just interact in the present and have some humor about it and some lightness, right? Like if I saw that ad that you're talking about, I'm in New York where there are 8 million gorgeous people anyway. I mean, all genders. I don't give a shit. You go to a big city like that, and you're like, fuck. I mean, same with LA. I mean, my God, it's just like, is everyone here beautiful? Right.
Yeah.
And the idea is to not just sit there and be triggered. Like that's as much madness as the addiction. It's to, be like, thanks for putting this all in front of me. It's amazing. It's diverse. They're all colors and shapes and sizes. And that fucking ad is hilarious to me, because years ago I probably would have run off and jerked off to it. But now I know it's just selling some perfume or whatever. I got my partner, or I'm single, it doesn't matter. I know I don't have to go run off and feed the monkey just because I saw an image. And that doesn't judge the image, and it doesn't judge the world we're in. I mean, that's, again, we could do 3 other podcasts.
I
But
know. I know. I want to focus on one part. So you said that even two people coming together in a relationship without the addiction, yeah, we all know it takes effort and a lot of effort. This is where I want to shine light on the hopefulness of if someone's tuning in here and they're thinking, oh my goodness, is this me? I've at least seen and found that with the awareness in going through programs like this, or communities or groups, that you actually can come out of it with even more honest, open, transparent communication compared to someone who perhaps doesn't have an addiction on paper, but they also suck at communicating. So there's light at the end of the tunnel is what I'm saying. I mean, you can tell me better.
No. I don't. It'd be redundant for me to. I would just reiterate that you're absolutely right. I think, in fact, sorry to pitch a little something, but that same coach, Amy Brown, and I were working on like a Pathways to Healing class, and the framework includes some 12-step stuff, but it's not about being an addict. It's just about using the tools from different sources that help anyone with wherever they are in the relationship, or in their life, or whatever. So yes, the recovery process could be for anybody. That's why there are books out there like A Gentle Path to the 12 Steps by Patrick Carnes. He's like the sex addiction guru, right? He's like the forefather.
Yes.
And you don't have to be an addict. Or John Kim, I'm sure you've seen all the posts that I've been doing. He does there's this workbook he has, 31 Days Single on Purpose. Well, that's great for anybody. It doesn't even need to be single on purpose. It could just be like on purpose. How do you want to live your life one day at a time without judging yourself, but acknowledging, right, the things that need healed and worked on and assisted with, and the things that are your character, assets that can help you through the whole process of healing whatever you need to heal. So yes, couples who have no prior anything, I don't know, everybody's got something, but for those who, don't come from abuse or maladaptation or whatever, yeah, these tools can work for anybody. And I think that is something that I always say, and this will probably speak to what you're talking about, Steph, is, in my most sublime and my most peaceful, grateful days, I'm like, I can be a little thankful even for the addiction. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I didn't want that porn to be put in front of me at 9 years old. It just was. And I'll never know what it would have been like. It's kind of like the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. I don't know what all the alternate universes would have been, but I doubt that I would have been this spiritually, psychologically, emotionally mindful and healed or healing and aware if I hadn't gone through this whole process. And that's, again, that's a process that anyone can go to if they just grab some of the tools and utilize it for themselves, whether or not they're addicts.
Yes, but like we know, people typically do not do this unless they're forced into it with some great amount of pain, which is why Carl Jung and Viktor Frankl say finding meaning in pain is actually where the healing and the recovery comes from. So I have two points that I wanted to ask you quickly. One of them I'm more curious about. So you mentioned now that you are dating or you're in a relationship, and you've been in recovery for a little bit over 20 years?
15.
15. Okay. So what, I guess, precautions or how has that been now dating like this?
I've probably had I've had three relationships in sobriety since divorce. And divorce was about 12, 13 years ago. And this has been by far the most open and communicative, and I think in the most vulnerable and intimate, where I was just able to be like, okay, like just put my cards on the table, kind of little Robin Williams and Good Will Hunting, just be like, I'm here for this. Like I'm in. And here's everything that comes with that. What do you think? Right. And then she, and then I get to hear her stories as well. And we just work it out, a conversation at a time, a day at a time. I mean, I have a little bit of an advantage now because now that I'm coaching, I'm out there and I've like literally outed myself, even from 12 step, which, of course, most 12 steppers don't do. I tell, when I was dating, I would tell, I say, yeah, just Google me if you want to know what you're getting into. And I was like, and it's either for you or it's not. I was like, I'm good with where I am, but I'm a work in progress, like anybody. And there's also there's a lot of dark. There's a lot of, you're just talking about like Jung, and there's a lot of shadow work there. My childhood has some shit, and it affects me to this day. But I have the tools and I have the awareness, and then I have the toolkit. I call them arrows in my quiver. I've got plenty of arrows to keep pulling out and just use when shit comes up. And that's what I do. And I think the main thing, if you want me to answer shorter than any of these answers I've given you today, is the communication. Like whatever comes up, I gotta say it. I'd be lying if it's like 100% of the time, but 98% of the time, if something's coming up, I just voice it in as diplomatic and vulnerable and honest way as I can. I was triggered. I was this. Why'd you say that? Did I misunderstood? I statements. I try to walk my fucking talk. I mean, I can't coach folks on relationships and intimacy if I'm not applying these rules to myself. So it's been wonderful. We just on astrologically, spiritually, backgrounds, our ethnic background, like there's all this overlap. We're Leo Sag, so if anyone wants to look up Leo Sag couples, we're kind of badass and we fit well.
I'm Leo. Who's the Leo in you guys?
She is. I'm the Sag.
Okay, so it's Sagittarius fire as well, no?
Yeah. It's two fire signs.
Okay. So I actually did hear from an astrologist that I'll probably have a good matchup with another fire. So interesting, good, and you guys then are confirming it.
Right. No, it's been great.
Oh, fun.
We revel in that. We're both middle aged, so we're like, how did we find each other? We don't know. This was awesome. Thank God we took the chance. And that's another thing is. When you're talking about two couples, whether healthy or not, or if it's two addicts, we just have to take the chance. We have to allow the vulnerability, like Brene Brown says all the time. Allow yourself to be vulnerable. And yeah, you could get your ass kicked that way, but it's such a trite thing to say, but it's like I'd rather like risk it, right? And it misfires than always wonder shoulda, coulda, woulda. If I hadn't been in this relationship, I'd be, oh my God, and I'd gotten wind of how good it could have been, I'd be very sad because we're having a good time.
That's amazing.